Good morning, Dan and Amy. Well, we're talking about the big government press corps at the Chicago and Springfield levels. Now, talk about it at the federal level. The headlines alone about Trump's proposed budget are really telling. New York Times, Trump's budget cuts deeply into Medicaid and anti-poverty efforts. And Democrats into hysterics over Trump's proposed budget, which, what's the sum total of it? 2% cuts annually to non-defense spending. 2%.
Really? Well, they're calling it the reverse Robin Hood. That it's going to hurt, those in need, the poorest.
2% cut
2%
annually. And that is the end of Western civilization. Of course it is, if your worldview is government-centric. If you need to deliver for dependence on the government because that's your constituency and that's how you maintain your political power. So you can understand the Democrats' hysteria. Wall Street Journal op-ed I thought was very interesting, noting that this is Bob Kerry's budget that Trump has proposed. Trump launched his first, the Wall Street Journal editorial board writes about Trump's first full budget proposal. Think of it as a vindication of Bob Kerry, the former Nebraska senator, Democrat, and a few other brave Democrats who warned repeatedly in the 90s that failing to reform entitlements would eventually squeeze other progressive programs. Well, here we are. And it includes Mr. Trump imitating Democrats and ducking Social Security and Medicare, which means everything else the government does has to fight for what's left.
Well, one Republican who's against and claims that it's DOA is, of course, Senator John McCain.
Is it dead on arrival?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, senior economist for CNN, and former Donald Trump advisor. Steve, Bob Kerry's budget?
Morning, guys. By the way, I'm sorry again. I have to chastise you this morning. You said that this budget cuts spending. It does not cut spending. Spending goes up by $100 billion under this budget in the first year, and every subsequent year. So you're speaking Washington speak.
Well, wait a second.
You're speaking Washington speak. It's not a cut. I mean, if spending goes up from $4 trillion to $4.1 trillion, ladies and gentlemen, that is not a spending cut.
Well, I agree, but isn't it 2% cuts annually to non-defense spending?
Some of the programs are going to be cut.
Yes.
But the point is other programs are going to grow even faster than inflation rates. So overall, this budget does not cut the spending. Now, look, I loved Mick. I think Mick Mulvaney, who is Trump's budget director, is shaping up to be the best budget director ever. This is a great budget if you're a fiscal conservative, if you want to cut unnecessary, wasteful programs. And I loved his statement. Guys, Dan, I mean, people were faking when he said this. If you collect food stamps and you're collecting these government benefits, welfare benefits, we need you to work. We need you to work. If you're able-bodied and you're able to work, you should work.
Crazy talk.
And giving people a hand up, not a handout. And my God, the liberal welfare establishment went completely crazy. You're going to require people to actually work for their benefits? That's the worst thing I've ever heard. That's cruel.
Well, he said that there'll be a balanced budget in 10 years, but that's with a 3% growth rate. Is that possible? I mean, that can't be guaranteed.
You got it. Yep. And I wrote this 2 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal that we can attain 3% growth. The reason, that the debt doubled under Barack Obama, the debt went from $9.5 trillion to almost $19 trillion under Obama, was that we saw such meager growth. You cannot get to a balanced budget, ladies and gentlemen, if the economy grows at less than 2%. You just don't get the revenue growth. Now, that's why the tax cut is really so essential. You've got to get the tax cut done to get the economy moving again. We have the most uncompetitive business tax structure in the entire world. This is a very good budget. It's going to grow the economy. It's going to shrink Washington. It is going to drain the swamp. And guess what? When you call for draining the swamp, people in the swamp aren't too happy about that.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the reality is, I mean, for the budget not to increase deficits in the short term, all you really have to have is real economic growth above the rate the government borrows. So, I mean,
this was a key question that Amy asked, and I'm so glad you asked this, Amy, because there was a front page story in the Wall Street Journal about, I think it was a week ago Wednesday, saying all economists agree we can't grow at 3%. It's impossible. It's like what? The long-term growth rate of this U.S. economy from 1950 to 2000 was 3.3%. So you're saying we can't get to below average growth? That's ridiculous. Now, what liberals are saying is we tried everything we could think of. We had minimum wage increases. We had tax increases on the rich. We had the $800 billion stimulus plan. We had Obamacare. We had the Fed flood the economy with cheap money, and we weren't able to produce 3% growth. Therefore, nobody can create it. Well, that's because you didn't do the right things. Everything that Obama did on the economy, and Bush, by the way, for his last term, everything they did was wrong. And it actually drained the economy of growth. We can get that back. I mean, look, I'm shooting for 4% growth. I told Trump we can get 4. So to say we can have 3% growth is a layup. I mean, that's subpar growth. We got to get people in the workforce. We got to get people working and off welfare.
And that's your head talking, Steve. But I want to speak to your heart.
Oh boy, here
I
we
don't
go.
have one. I'm a conservative. I don't have a heart.
Right. Because Hillary Clinton has said that this budget contains, quote, an unimaginable level of cruelty.
Right. Well, what can I say? That's we conservatives just don't have. Of course, liberals don't have brains. But look, the idea that you should require people to work for benefits, that's something I bet 80, even my liberal friends agree with that. I mean, if a government's going to give you a benefit, you have to do something in return for it.
Well, it's the work part that kind of bothers me. But, I mean, how much is going to be cut from Medicaid?
Medicaid, what we want to do on Medicaid is a couple of things. The most important thing to do with Medicaid, first of all, why not a work requirement for Medicaid? A lot of people on Medicaid are not working. If you're going to get a government benefit, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to go out and get a job, or the government's going to give you a job. And second of all, turn it back to the states. Let the states figure out ways to reduce the cost of this. Co-pays. You go into the emergency room, you're going to have to pay $10 or something like that. Letting people out of nursing homes and using home care as an alternative to nursing homes, which is actually better for the elderly. Those kinds of things can save a lot of money. I guarantee you, though, that if you have Washington try to find the one-size-fits-all solution, they're not going to come up with it. The solutions are going to come from the states. That's what happened in the 1990s when Bill Clinton was president. We had a Republican Congress. We reformed welfare. By the way, we required work for welfare. And you know what happened when we did that? When we required people to get a job? We saw a 50% decline in the number of people on welfare. And we tracked those people. We found most of them, the vast majority of them, got jobs. They actually climbed the economic ladder. Many of them got into the middle class. How in the world, Dan, is that cruel?
Dan?
Hillary Clinton said so. That's how.
Well, they're saying it shows compassion for the rich, too, and they call it the reverse Robin Hood. So are any Republicans backing President Trump on this budget?
No, of course not. Congress loves to play Santa Claus. They don't want to cut anything. They don't want to trim expenditures. They want to spend. Look, Amy, I go back to the Reagan years. It was the same thing. Reagan would propose these budgets where we'd try to act fiscally responsible, and he'd turn it over to Congress. Didn't matter which party was in control. Congress likes to spend money. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why we have a $20 trillion debt.
Well,
I don't want to ruin people's day, but that's just a fact.
Well,
it doesn't matter if they have an hour or a They want to spend your money.
Okay, but that's all well and good, but there's a problem there that Trump needs to confront, because if that's the position that Congress takes, then Republicans aren't going to be in charge of it after 2018.
Well, that's true. They're going to own it. So they better get this tax cut done to get the economy moving again. I do think that, look, Obamacare is going to be repealed. That's $1 trillion of budget savings over the next 10 years. I do think some of these welfare reforms are going to happen. But, some of the cuts in the domestic programs you're talking about, they're not going to do that. I've been to this movie 100 times before. They are almost incapable of doing it. But I'll give you one statistic on the way out. If we can hold federal spending to 2.5% growth per year for the next 10 years, we can afford to do the entire Trump tax cut. And in 10 years, we will have a balanced budget. So you can do this. The numbers add up. But you're right. That means you're going to have to do something about these mega entitlements that nobody seems to want to touch. They're politically untouchable right now. And if that happens, we're going to keep running these debts because 10,000 baby boomers are retiring every single day.
He is Steve Moore, Wall Street Journal columnist, senior economist for CNN, former Trump advisor. Steve, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Okay.
And he's gone.
And he joined us on our Turnkey.Pro Answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.